Hello and welcome to today's Maths Pathway webinar. Before we get started, we would like to pay our respects to the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of this land, and we also would like to pay our respects to the leaders past, present and future of the Kulin Nation. Well, my name is M. Duncan.
And my name's Tom Moore, and today's webinar is all about helping your students to see the purpose behind what they're learning. But before we go any further, we're actually going to tell you about a fantastic opportunity that you guys all have at home, and that is you can win a class set of these resources valued at over $200, and we can send that to you. All you need to do is enter the competition, and we'll let you know more about that throughout the webinar.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. Freebies.
Excellent. So as I said, this webinar is all about helping your students to see the purpose behind what they're learning, and we're going to do that through a few different ways. We're going to explore a skill acquisition model that applies not only to maths, but to all types of skills and different areas that maybe you wouldn't even think are relevant. And then we're going to have a look at the Maths Pathway Learning and Teaching model and how that relates to the skill acquisition model. And then finally, we're going to look at how the Maths Pathway Learning model and the skill acquisition model really addresses the big question, that is developing purpose or showing the students the purpose behind what they're learning.
Yes, and it's such an important thing, isn't it? How often do teachers face that from their students, Tom? Why are we doing this? You know, why do I need to know this? So it's such an important thing to tap into that purpose, and I'm glad that we're able to do that today.
All too often, really. There were a number of times where you'd hear that question and it would just send shivers through your spine, really. Yeah. Why do we need to know this? So, well, that's what this is all about, is really showing that purpose. And in fact, we're actually going to take a little bit of a different direction today. We're going to start off with a bit of a story about an absolute Australian icon, a legend.
Oh, Tom, that's so nice of you. I'm sitting right here.
That's right, I brought Em in just for this. No, actually, I'm talking about another legend, that is Sir Donald Bradman. Someone who we all know in Australia, and maybe some of those people overseas who are tuning in right now may have heard of Sir Donald Bradman. He is a legend of cricket, and in fact, I don't know if you know this or not, but Sir Donald Bradman became a legend because of the different types of practice that he would involve himself in. In fact, I'm going to show you a video of the type of practice that he did.
I'm interested to hear more about this, Tom, because I'm a bit sceptical about how you're going to rope Sir Donald Bradman back around to maths, but, you know, I trust you, so...
Have some faith then, have some faith. All right, well, let's watch this video, and I'll talk you through it. So that's his house as he was growing up, and you can see here, he's just hitting the ball against essentially a water tank. And it's not just any old ball, it's actually a golf ball, believe it or not a cricket ball, and he's using a cricket stump to do it. Now, as he throws the ball against the water tank, it goes off in different directions. And being a golf ball as well, it's a little bit harder to hit because it's smaller. And also, because he's got the cricket stump, it doesn't have the wide essential area of the cricket bat. So it's really a little bit different and a little bit more challenging. But the reason I bring that up is because, well, it's really quite a closed skill. And I'll talk about that in a second as well, where I've got what we call the skill acquisition continuum. And that is, you can see here, what he's doing is down the closed end of the spectrum. Because let's have a think about some of the things that are at play here. You know, he's throwing a ball against a round well, which will make it bounce off in different directions. So that's sort of one variable that comes into play.
But I suppose apart from that, it's quite closed in nature, isn't it? There aren't a lot of other things involved. It's a repeated action of the same skill over and over again. And even though you've mentioned there are some slight variables there in terms of where the ball might go and which direction it might take, it's still really a repetition of kind of a single set of skills.
That's it, and you can control quite a lot of things in that, can't you? But then why does he do this? Why would you want to hit a ball against a water tank for that long? Well, of course, we all know that Sir Donald Bradman went on to become arguably the best player of the game in history. And you can see here in the video, he's actually hitting the ball for 6. And, well, we know he wasn't able to just do that. It came through practice. But he's applying that practice that he did in a closed scenario into an open type of scenario where there's a whole bunch of variables coming into play. For example, you've got the bowler who they may be running up and bowling at pace, or maybe they slow it down a little bit. Maybe there's some spin in there. We don't know. He didn't know coming into it as well. But obviously through that practice, he was able to take into account all of these different variables and be able to hit that 6, as you could see on the screen before.
So I suppose we're looking at the closed skill practice as being really essential in terms of building the capacity to apply it in that open setting.
That's exactly, and there's so many different variables that he's dealing with there. So yeah, it really comes down to practicing in a closed setting so that way you can then improve in an open type of setting. So in terms of a skill acquisition model, well, that comes back to, well, if I wanted to play cricket, what would I go and do? And
I'm guessing you wouldn't go straight from bouncing a ball against the water tank straight into playing your first test match.
Not for Australia, not putting on the baggy green.
Yeah, there might need to be a few steps in between there.
There certainly are. And let's have a look at it, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And this is what I call the skill acquisition model. And that is, you know, if I wanted to play a game or start up cricket, I probably have had a few hits with my friends before. But then I'd go, okay, well, why don't I go and join a club? So I'd head down to the club and I would have some team practice that I'd become part of. And during that time, the coach would probably get us to do a couple of little hits in a closed setting, you know, in the nets or something along those lines. But then we'd actually talk about some team tactics. So where are we going to field? How are we going to set up as a team? All of those things which come into play there. And that's sort of, it's not a closed thing, but it's also probably not entirely as open as what a real game would be. And you'd do that, and you'd also get feedback from the coach as to how you're going as a team as well.
I think that feedback's an essential thing, isn't it?
It certainly is. So as you can see here on the screen, the feedback comes into play. And that's where we then go into, of course, a game type scenario where we talk about all those different variables that come into play. You know, you've got the sledger who's right behind you, just getting stuck into your ear the whole time. As we know, if you're a cricket player, you'll have experienced that before. But then, of course, the game also provides an opportunity for feedback as well. You know, when you go out, you might have hit an edge or something like that. The ball goes off in a direction that you didn't think it was going to do, and you get caught out. Or maybe, for example, your coach might give you some feedback as a team that you can then go and work on. And if you're someone who takes your skill that you're trying to develop, so in this case it's cricket, but I know you're a musician, aren't you, Em?
Yes, yeah. So I suppose it's probably a similar situation. If you were learning a musical instrument, you'd have your solo practice where you'd be working on your technical proficiency, and then you might go to rehearsal with a band or an orchestra, which is a little bit more open, as you said, and an opportunity to build on those other important factors around, you know, communication and cohesiveness and those sorts of things. And then your real open setting, I suppose, would be a live performance. And I think, Tom, you've hit a really key point there where you do want the feedback from that live performance or that game setting or whatever that real open skill exposure might be, and what is it that you'd want to do with that feedback?
Well, of course, you're going to take the feedback on and really go and focus and hone in on trying to improve in that one specific area. So that's bringing it back to the cricket thing, is where, you know, you might go back and practice like Sir Donald Bradman did over and over again in a really closed setting. And of course, through doing that, you get feedback as well. You know, if you thought, all right, I want to practice with my catching, and you throw the ball up 100 times and you drop it a few times, well, your feedback is, I didn't quite master the catching, did I?
No, not quite.
So you can get the feedback's more
I might have had that feedback once or twice.
No, I won't make you catch something. So yeah, that's where you can get the feedback from there. And of course, the feedback then loops around again, and you can then take that into your team practice, and the cycle continues until you get better and you can don the baggy green.
I think it is really important to point out, Tom, that we've talked about two things here. One of them being that continuum from closed to open skill settings, and the other being that cycle of skill acquisition. So even though we're looking at a continuum, we're not just moving from one end of the continuum to the other and staying there. We really do want that cycle to continue.
That's it. And if you have a look, we've just put up on the screen now, so you'll see that I've actually joined those two things together. So you can see down the closed end, I've got my individual practice. In the middle, there's a team practice where we sort of try and simulate some of the things that would happen in the game scenario. And then up the open end, there's the game scenario as well.
And it occurs to me that this whole skill acquisition model and what you've just talked about with cricket and what we mentioned about music, it really fits with the structure and the framework that we use in our maths pathway classes as well. So we've got that, the closed end of the skill acquisition is where students are engaging in their individual module work. So they're really honing in those skills on specific content areas of mathematics. And they're doing that in an individualised setting, and they're getting that feedback through, you know, whether or not they're mastering the content and whether they're answering the questions correctly.
So they're working on a skill that is specific to them.
That's right.
It's what they need to work on,
yes,
rather than the whole team.
Yes.
Ah,
yeah.
great.
And we move a little further along the continuum and we get towards our mini lessons, or as some people might think of them as a small group explicit teaching that's sort of data driven or targeted in a particular way. So the great thing about Maths Pathway, of course, is that you have a whole bunch of data that you can use to inform your decisions around those structured lessons. But the mini lessons are really an opportunity to engage in a more open setting. So there are slightly more variables there. You've got the group work dynamic, you've got different levels of ability working together, and you're able to actually get students engaging in mathematical discourse with one another and actually take on feedback from one another as well.
And so wait a second, you said that there's data there that the teachers can just use to generate for a mini lesson. So they can just click on a button and see that these students are ready to do a mini lesson in this area.
They can, yeah.
That's great. How easy is that? That makes it easier for the teacher.
It does, yeah, absolutely. And as we move further along that continuum to the rich learning, this is where things really open up. So this is our gameplay, essentially, and it really is an opportunity for playing with maths. It gives students the opportunity to make connections between different concepts. Again, it's a group setting, so you're building on the capacity for interrelation and being able to have that discourse and connection with each other. And this is where the purpose behind maths really comes into it. And Tom, you were talking about, you know, the whole idea of wanting to really see what the underlying purpose is behind their learning. And the rich learning is where we can really demonstrate an application of some of those closed skills that students have been working on.
So a game for cricket is where you bring in the catching, the batting, the fielding, all of those types of things. Rich learning for maths is where you bring in a whole range of different skills. So it might be algebra, it might be number, it might be area, it could be all of those different things. And you bring them all into the one activity and they're drawing on all of these different concepts and bringing them together.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. So then of course from the rich learning, as we know, the students will see that and they go, oh, maybe I struggled with this one particular area. And that's where they get their feedback is, okay, well, this is something I want to go and focus on, which of course they can do that through the Maths Pathway Learning and Teaching model, where they can choose a module that is relevant to them and that can focus in on that particular area.
They can. And as you've highlighted, Tom, the feedback is so essential in this cycle as well. So just like we talked about with the acquisition model for cricket, it's really important in the Maths Pathway Learning and Teaching model as well. So feedback from the individualised learning that students are doing at that closed end will inform, that's the data that teachers can use to sort of construct those smaller groups for the explicit teaching. And the data that you get from that can sort of feed into the rich learning and the application side of things as well. And of course then there's the feedback, as you've just said, from that rich learning that gives students an indication of what areas they would like to continue to improve on.
Excellent. So we've really now addressed the whole Maths Pathway Learning and Teaching model and how it addresses the same kind of skill acquisition model that you can see in cricket or learning a musical instrument. So the Maths Pathway Learning model is essentially that, isn't it?
It is, and it really is a structure and framework that helps make I guess achieving these three aspects of skill acquisition more manageable in your classes. So we know that these are already things that teachers are doing, but this is a way to sort of structure it and give it that framework.
Now, with that framework as well, there are a number of teachers who, when it comes to the mini lessons and then the rich learning side of things, that maybe don't feel as comfortable. And I know that Maths Pathway has some of the stuff with the rich learning, but there are other resources out there. And we know as teachers, you guys are amazing at finding all of these resources and being able to use them with your classes. And maybe you've used one of these before, and that's what we're going to explore now, which is Maths 300, which a lot of teachers, like I said, use in conjunction with Maths Pathway. Now, Maths 300 is a really good resource for addressing mini lessons and also the rich learning. So it's more of the open-ended side of things rather than the targeted sort of stuff.
It is, yeah. It is, as you said, it's the playground for mathematics, isn't it, really? The rich learning. Yeah.
And we all love a good playground, don't we?
We do, yeah.
So, well, I'm going to show you a couple of activities now from the Maths 300 package. And these are two of my favourite that I've used with my classes. And every time I do it, I always get a lot of engagement with them. The first one is called Cubenets. And I'm going to grab these two cubes here that we can see. And in fact, I'm just going to let you now know that at the end of this webinar, we will tell you how you can win a class set of these GeoFix squares so that you can run a Cubenets lesson with your class, and you can keep them as well, so you can win those. Cool. Now, what I'd like you to do, please, Em, is I'd like you to open up your Cubenet and show us what you've got, and I'll do the same.
Okay. All right.
So, wow, all right, you've opened yours up here and it looks like this, and I've opened mine up and it looks probably more like your traditional sort of cube net, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. This is probably immediately what I pictured when you said the words cube net, and this is, yeah, something a bit different.
Can you just prove to me again that that actually works? Because this is odd. I just want to see. So mine we know works, but I'll show you.
Mine folds into a cube. There we go.
Oh wow, I did not know that that's what it looked like. That's fascinating.
It is.
Excellent. Well, if we open it up again, we can see here that both of these, in fact, will fold together to make a cube. Now, I know when I look at this, I've got a question that comes to mind. Do you have any questions that come to your mind?
Well, I'm curious. We've already got 2 examples here. I'd be curious to know actually how many other ways you can unfold a cube.
You just read my mind.
Did
You're
I?
Amazing. So yes, that was exactly the question that I had as well. That is, how many different ways can you unfold these to make a cube, or how many different cube nets are there? And this is a great exploration for your students, because quite often the question that you might see is, all right, what will this fold up to make? What 3D shape will this make? But instead we start with the 3D shape and we'll say, okay, well, how many different nets are there for this shape? And you can just imagine how much more of a rich context this gives it. Because we can see 2 here, but how many are there? If you think you know, leave it in the comments below.
I think it's nice as well that we've got that tangible element to this as well. It's sort of a bit different than giving students a piece of paper with a net drawn on it, as you said, and saying, what does this fold up to make? It's nice to start with that 3D element and actually start with something that's physical and that you are pulling it apart, and it's kind of emphasising that there is play involved here.
Absolutely. Then the next thing though is, well, what makes this rich, I guess? Because we talk about rich lessons all the time and open-ended tasks, and you know, we need to know what makes it rich. Well, I guess it's the range of different ways that this can go. Obviously we're looking at 2D shapes in terms of, or 2D nets that you can see here that make 3D shapes. So we're talking about shape here first of all. Then also we will need to make sure, well, you know, is there going to be some that maybe double up? For example, does a student who gets this one and another student who gets this one, are they the same net? Well, in fact, of course they're the same net, because they've just been reflected. So we can now have a conversation about reflections as well.
And what happens if I turn it this way, Tom?
Oh, so that may look different to some students as well. So we're now talking rotations too, aren't we? So we've got reflections, rotations, we're talking about 3D shapes. And the other thing that we can discuss here as well is a real great strategy that mathematicians do, which is working through all problems or solutions systematically. And I'll show you what I mean. If we have a look here, I've got my cube net that I've got, and I could call this a stem 4. Let me just try here to make a stem, I'll make a stem 6 actually. Now, let me ask you, Em.
Yep.
Does this look like it's going to make a cube to you?
No, it does not.
No, it doesn't. I'll prove it. That's not going to end up being a cube, is it?
No.
Excellent. So we know a stem 6 won't work. How about a stem 5? Well, that is, if I grab this here and I put it here like this, will that make a cube?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Let's have a look. And of course, as we can see,
oh, it's made a little house.
It has. There we go. Or a pentagon. So we can see here that that hasn't made a cube. So stem 5 doesn't work. Stem 4 we know does work, because if I put this down here like I had it before, and I'll do this one as well, we know that that in fact makes a cube. You happen to have a stem 3, that is the most that you've got in any direction is 3.
Yes.
Well, the question that students can ask is, how many different stem 4 ones can I make? And they can work through them systematically. How many different stem 3 ones can I make? Are there any stem 2 ones? And are there any stem 1 cube nets that exist as well?
I think Tom's highlighted something really important that I just want to point out there as well, and it's the questions students can ask. And that's actually such an important aspect of rich learning, isn't it? Is that we're really prompting students to make these discoveries for themselves. We don't want to give them sort of the structure of these are the things, these are the questions, go find the answers. The beauty of rich learning is having students actually generating those questions for themselves and sort of that aspect of wonder and discovery.
Yeah, because if they wonder it, then there's the motivation, isn't it? They want to know the answer for themselves. Absolutely. So let's now have a look at the next task. So like I said, if you think you know the answers to this, put it in the comments below and I'll tell you how you can win those later on. So put those over to the side. I'll just chuck them down on the ground.
Right.
And we're going to now have a look at another one of my favourite tasks, which is called First Down the Mountain. And once again, this is in the Maths 300 software. And we're just going to place these here. If you don't mind, then I'll get you to help me as well.
Sure, I can do that. All right.
There, excellent. So imagine for a second that all of these counters are actually on top of the numbers instead of above. So the 2 is here, for example. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to roll the dice. And when I roll the dice, there we go, 5 and 5 is 10. So the 10 would move from here down to here.
Oh, okay.
The question is, which number will be the first one to reach the win zone? What would you think?
Well, firstly, straight away looking at this, I thought, well, that's easy. 2 and 12 have only got 2 spaces to go before they win, so it's got to be one of those. But then when I thought about the numbers that you're likely to come up with when you actually roll 2 dice, I'm thinking it might actually be sort of something a little closer to the middle there.
Okay, so you're saying because 7 has more solutions, or more
combinations
combinations that can make it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it's a bit further away.
It could be, yep.
To make it maybe a bit more fair. Well, that's great because you're already thinking along the lines of the mathematics, the exploration that you can have with this. Because you could get the students, I always do a game first of all, and I'll get a student, especially the students who are doing the right thing, so, you know, paying attention, all that, let them choose a number that they want to support or cheer on to win, and whoever wins, obviously, you can have a prize. So like a Mars bar is generally what I offer up as a winning thing. So I find whenever I do that, you're always going to have more students more invested because, you know, there's something at stake here for them too.
Bit of healthy competition.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, nothing motivates like chocolate. So we're going to now have a look.
It's funny, they call it dangling the carrot, but no one ever seems to.
No one ever wants.
No one uses a carrot as a prize.
That's it. All right, so there is some stuff here that we can look at in terms of the maths. First of all, I'll play the game with the whole class so they understand what's happening. And then I'll let them all go off and play 4 or 5 games in partners so they can actually explore the game themselves and keep track of the data. Then as a group, what we'll do is we'll collect all the data, or which numbers won over the whole, for the whole class. And so you can see then, if we've got, say, 12 groups of 2, then you'll have 60 different pieces of data that you could then put up on the board. So we've played 60 games. So we're now starting to look at some experimental probability. But then we can also look at the theoretical probability side of things as well. By grabbing, I'll just lean across you, sorry, Em.
Okay.
So I can look at the theoretical probability as well by bringing in things like my tree diagrams and getting them to create some of those to see, well, which number's most likely to be rolled when I roll 2 dice. I could do it that way, or maybe I might want to use a 2-way table where I have 1 + 1 would be 2, or 3 + 3 would be 6. And in fact, I've done this activity with students as young as in grade 4, and they've loved every bit of it. But you could also do it with year 7s, year 8s, year 9s, year 10s even, because you can go into a much richer application of this task. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Because from here, once you've done the probabilities and you've explored the experimental and theoretical, you can explore the experimental a little bit more. I'll just go onto the Maths 300 software. And there's a whole lot of different things that you can use with the Maths 300 software, and that is, I'll go to the first down the mountain. These are all other tasks that you can see on the screen at the moment, but I'll go to first down the mountain and we'll play a quick demonstration game. And it's always good to do this with your students.
And Tom, explain why you think it's important. I mean, we've already get the gist of the game. We've kind of played it now physically, tangibly. Why is it important to also do the demonstration online?
Well, because they need to understand what they see on the screen is relevant to what they've just done.
Yep.
And because what we're going to go through here, I'll just press spacebar a couple of times and you can see here how it works, and we'll go through it. You can see that it's exactly the same game as what we played before. Now, at the moment, that's not all that exciting, but when we bring it back to playing a mini game, so I can play, rather than playing 60 games as we did as a whole class that took probably 10, 15 minutes, I could play 10,000 games. And this, you can see here, would take us hours to play as a class. But let's have a look.
Ain't nobody got time for that, Tom.
That's exactly it. We've got a curriculum to address and all those types of things. So if I go through and I play 10,000 games, let's see what happens. I'll press spacebar and let's see what number actually wins the most. Wow, we're up to 5,000 games already. That was quick, wasn't it?
It was.
Sped up a lot better. Nowhere near as tedious as playing it ourselves. And we can see here, well, that in fact, 2 and 11 actually won the most times.
Okay.
And maybe if we played it over and over again, we could get more and more results that we could compare. And you'll find that actually every time you do that, it's a similar kind of distribution in terms of how that goes. So we're looking now at experimental probabilities, but on a much grander scale, aren't we?
We are. And I think this might be a nice point to think about where else you could take this task. And, you know, for me, after seeing that, when I had thought that one of these numbers would be the winner, I sort of thinking now, okay, so what if we change the game? What if we change the shape of the mountain?
I love it. What if? That's a that's a question that mathematicians ask all the time. What if? What if I do this? What if I change something? That obviously opens up a whole new mathematical investigation. And in fact,
and I'm going to jump in here. So sorry, Tom, and we're both excited to say something at the same time. But I feel like the what if is the ability to generate those what if questions is really driven by the students actually developing those more closed skills. So that again is that link to purpose. The ability to actually ask those what if questions and to wonder during a task like this is actually underpinned by the skills that they've acquired in those closed settings. So
and the confidence that comes through that
absolutely.
too. So you can actually explore this task. So you can change maybe the layout if you like. And I'll quickly show you how to do that. You can come back to here and we can say testing theories. And I can choose, for example, if I had 2, I could have 3 squares that it wants to go down. And you can then play that game 10,000 times once again and see if that changes the likelihood of each number winning. So really, this has gone from just a fun little game that might engage students, or I can tell you it does engage students, to something that is a really deep mathematical investigation where we're bringing in theoretical probabilities, we're bringing in experimental probabilities, we're also talking about tree diagrams, two-way tables there, that really, things are endless. And when we're talking probabilities as well, you've got fractions and all of those things that come into it as well. So different concepts being brought in, and it gives purpose to why students might go through and learn things like fractions or learn something like two-way tables. It gives them reason for it. So those are the 2 Maths 300 activities that I absolutely love running with my classes, and I always find students who really engage with them when I do. So to really come back, and I'll just get back into my screen, so really to come back and sort of to summarise what today's been all about, it's really been about getting students to see the whole learning and teaching model. That is, we've got targeted work, mini lessons, and also rich learning. And it's important that students understand the purpose behind each one of these phases when we go through and teach them. And we need to do that through explicitly telling students, well, what is the purpose of it? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think really, you know, you can build that purpose in the way that you actually frame what students are doing and sort of setting, you know, learning goals or whatever it might be with those students on an individual setting or individual basis. But as well as that, when you frame the rich learning tasks that you're doing as well, you're reminding students that they're sort of pulling from their own basket of skills that they've acquired in terms of tackling this task.
So in terms of purpose, you could give learning goals, for example, in the mini lessons or in the rich learning lessons around collaboration, not just around skill, like mathematical skills and cognitive development. It could come down to personal development and interpersonal skills as well.
Yes.
And because that is the purpose of it. That's why we do these things, is to help develop students' social abilities as well, which is great.
Yeah.
The other thing that we really want to focus on is how each phase interconnects with each other. That is, if we don't have the module work, like the practice where students can go through and hone in their skills, then the other 2 areas will struggle.
That's right. And it is really about coaching students to think about their learning as well. We can't expect students to do this sort of naturally without any sort of scaffolding there, and it's so important to have those feedback discussions with them and to help students and guide students in the reflection that they do after their learning.
So the students really need to understand the process of learning rather than just doing work because that's what they've been told to do. They need to see why things fit in particular with a whole model.
Yeah, and perhaps being able to compartmentalise it in this way and understand sort of where it's sitting along that continuum and what it's sort of being directed towards.
Absolutely, and you could even use an example like I did today with and Em did as well with the the cricket or the music or anything where the students are interested, to be able to explain, well, where each thing fits.
Yeah. And next time your students ask, why are we doing this rich learning task? Well, without the rich learning or without the cricket match, then you're just banging a ball against a water drum with a stick. So
that's exactly it. So yeah, absolutely. And then even with the mini lessons, why do we have mini lessons? Well, because we need students to be able to understand that mini lessons are a great opportunity to focus their ability to work in small groups, and it gives them the opportunity to develop those social skills, but also build on a particular concept, one concept. And of course, the rich lessons is bringing in lots of different concepts as well. So it really is, it's important to make sure that students understand the whole model and why they are focusing on different parts of it. Because when they understand that, that gives them purpose to their learning.
Great point, Tom.
So, just to finish up, we've got like I said, we did offer a competition at the beginning of the webinar, and it's time now to explain how that works. Like I said, we've got 3 of these, so that's a whole class set valued at over $200 that you guys can win. And to do that, all you need to do is go to the comments section below. You'll see that there is a link, or you'll also see the link up on the screen in a second as well. That link, all you need to do is put your details in there, and we will then choose a winner at random. So you may be the lucky person to win over $200 worth of equipment for your class that you can then run a Cubenets session with. And please let us know how it goes as well.
And also let us know if you would like to know more about how Maths Pathway can help you structure this sort of skill acquisition cycle in your classes too.
Excellent. Well, my name's Tom Moore.
And I'm Em Duncan.
And thank you so much for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.